Oi oi, my name is Ida Dunmore and I'm making this video on such a lack of phone. I'd appreciate it if there was no pointing and laughing, please. So naturally I understand that any comment about the families involved in the Lucy Letby case is highly controversial, and there is a seething, readily frothing viper's pit of idiots waiting to strawman and misrepresent any comment made whatsoever. But these are the people who want to convince a grieving mother that she's being called a liar on social media when they know that's not the case. So I can't really be asked with giving any thought to what they say, and I think we've got stuff to talk about. So I'm going to do that and ignore the the noise, I guess you could call it. It was very soon after the first volley of Lucy Letby convictions that I heard an interview with the parents of babies L and M on the Daily Mail podcast, and I was really troubled by it. And now a second set of parents have given an interview where they disclose something really quite similar. There's no disputing that the parents of Lucy Letby's alleged victims are indeed victims. Many were already horribly failed, and then their most private traumas have been dragged into public to be picked apart, and they have no choice or voice in the matter. And while the parents I was speaking about in this video did not lose their children, I don't think you could argue that what they've been through is significantly less traumatic than that, because they've had all these ideas planted in their head that their baby was predated upon by a monster, and that they have this disabled child and God knows how he was harmed and that it was likely intentional, and he has no prognosis. They've been terrorised, utterly terrorised, about things that supposedly happened right under their nose that they didn't even notice. And then their isolation and distress, I suspect, has been compounded by the enforced anonymity, which they have no say in. And that itself strikes me as really odd. When the Southport murder has happened, we know the names of those poor little girls. Why the anonymity here? And I'm not suggesting they don't deserve it and shouldn't be protected from any kind of identification that they are against, but the number of anonymity orders and the scope of it is bizarre. As well, it seems like the absolute last thing you'd want to do if you want to avoid Sandy Hook denialist types. And let me tell you, they are definitely around. There is a small but very persistent number of people who believe that Lucy Letby doesn't exist and is merely a Masonic psyop to fool the masses. It's just been universally brilliant, the internet, hasn't it? So anyway, I went to see Conviction, the case of Lucy Letby, at the cinema about a week before its TV broadcast. I was overall pretty impressed. I think they've tried quite hard to be balanced. But what did strike me as interesting was the dichotomy between those who believe Lucy Letby is bang to rights and those who don't, with those whose careers were hugely helped by it having the very strongest feelings. So over in the guilt corner, at least in this documentary, you have Liz Hull and Dewi Evans, both of whom come across as rigid, intractable, clinging on by their fingernails to the notion that Lucy Letby is guilty, as if a court process and jury are infallible. So it was a pretty sombre affair at the cinema, but despite this, Dewi copped some real howlers, particularly when watching the press conference.
You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. Now!
This joke comes to you from Judge Bread on Twitter, who deserves crediting and probably following. Anyway, sadly, time to turn to the grim subject matter at hand, and I'm going to be having a close look at what the parents in the film said. Now, these parents have never spoken before, and Lucy Letby was never charged over their child. But maybe they account for one of the future alleged charges. Who knows, eh?
Our son was born in the campuses of Chester Hospital in 2015. He was full term and healthy.
He'd been healthy all the way through the pregnancy up to that point.
So obviously everyone worries about their babies, but if you've had a long, healthy pregnancy and all the reassurance that come with it, you are going to be so utterly unprepared for what comes next.
He was taken away somewhere. They just said, oh, it's okay, he just needs a little bit of help breathing.
They really are not supposed to be taking people's babies away immediately after delivery without fully explaining where and giving the option to be present. And as for, don't worry, he just needs some help breathing, that's utterly terrifying and extremely vague. They must have been petrified. And not only that, it gets worse.
We were taken back to the room where I'd been in labour, and we were just left there on our own, not really knowing what was going on.
Just imagine that.
We're obviously worried. When we were there a couple of hours, wasn't it?
Went back to the room that is normally being cleaned and just left there for a couple of hours whilst not knowing what's going on with their baby is just staggering. It's really, really bad. It's horrendous. And although it's necessary, it's bad enough taking a baby from their mother. We're all told skin to skin straight away, you know, all of this. They must have been overwhelmed with fear. This is outrageous.
Seemed to last forever, didn't it?
I bet.
Nurse came in with the box. She came straight up to us. I didn't really see her, I just saw the box.
That is such a long time. It's such a long time to be left waiting. They're going to be so hyper vigilant. I'm surprised the dad wasn't kicking off somewhere about it. And then someone walks in with a box. I mean, shouldn't you be pre-warned, or you see the baby and be given the box, because then you've got something manifest, something physical to take away with you, haven't you? What a nightmare.
And I burst into tears. I remember saying to her something like, oh my God, is he dead?
All women after giving birth, they're in an extraordinarily delicate emotional and mental state. The risk of additional stresses, particularly being separated from your baby, triggering a psychiatric episode, is significant. And particularly just postnatal depression. And postnatal depression is horrendous, and it can kill and often has long-lasting effects on the mother-child relationship. What the fuck was that hospital doing?
And she just laughed. She was laughing when she thought that we thought the worst had happened.
While it is worth pointing out, we don't know whatever is going through anyone else's head. This mum seems to be very mature, cautious, not to be dramatic, and just quite sober about it all. She seems eminently reliable, I would say. But you got to wonder, did this nurse know that no one else had come in to speak to them? And if that, does it explain a nervous laugh? Laughter is itself a really weird phenomenon among humans, and we don't really understand. There's certainly no firm science or identification of it. It runs the gamut from maniacal evil cackle to something that is much sadder and consoling, or confused and trying to diffuse tension. There's just so many variations of this. Here is neuroscientist Sophie Scott on her TED Talk about the intricacies of crying and laughter.
We've been making people laugh, which everyone's really up for. They don't mind being made to laugh in the lab. We've also been making them cry, which on the whole, people are less pleased with. But we've got some now good examples of people really laughing and really crying. And some of them are very confusing. Well, here's some laughter. No, that's crying, sorry. Laughter. Now, this is some crying that sounds like laughter. And here's some laughter that sounds like crying. And it goes back to the fact that they're actually made quite physically similar ways. They're made in very primitive ways, ways that babies can make sound.
I.e., laughter is often quite an ambiguous sound or even a gesture. I mean, this poor woman has just given birth, which is one of the most psychiatrically, emotionally, just fundamentally volatile times. Certainly for me, it was staggering just how vulnerable I felt. And I've had quite a life. They have completely neglected to tell her what is going on, and every single sinew and fibre in that woman's body is going to be screaming at her to go and get her baby. Unless, of course, instincts and hormones all being frustrated with so much stress, cause some kind of issue in terms of relating to her baby. I mean, I don't think that's the case in this situation, but it's a massive risk.
No, we just give these boxes out to all the parents of babies who've been really poorly.
Kind of wild the hospital never considered the optics or symbolism of that box, isn't it?
The nurse that gave us the box was Lucy Letby.
Let's assume this is definitely not a mistaken identity and it was a proper guffawing laugh. We have a 25-year-old nurse who's working very long hours and she's running almost from patient to patient, room to room, keeping people updated, doing procedures, checking on babies, etc. We don't know whether she's been told. Somebody will have by this time spoken to the parents and told them what's going on. And she's walked into this room with these people she's never met before in complete crisis. And her response to this heartbroken question is bad, stupid. But also this happened before the spike in baby deaths in early 2015, so she would not have been as experienced as she was to become, sadly, with encountering distressed parents. I know somebody whose baby died really soon after birth. She only got a fleeting glimpse of her baby's face because she was in a medical emergency as well. The baby then died, and a midwife, while checking her abdomen afterwards, remarked on how flat her stomach was, saying, "You wouldn't know you'd ever had a baby." People can say stupid, callous, crass, idiotic things without intent. And if it's another nurse, not Letby, does that make that nurse a murderer? This is intended for all the people reading the papers and commenting on social media that this is damning evidence of Lucy Letby's malevolent nature. If this was a mistake and another nurse did this, what then?
And she offered to take us to go and see him.
So Lucy Letby is actually the one who's helping them. Nurses are not always keen to do this. Certainly that's what I've been told. Not when they're busy.
Dr. Breary was there and he just explained that he didn't know what was really the issue. 3 times he'd been resuscitated.
So while their newborn son is needing to be resuscitated 3 times, his mum and dad are sat in the delivery suite in the same hospital, unaware of what's going on.
They couldn't explain why. I was very upset. I was frightened.
Yeah, just felt confused and just didn't make any sense.
What are the chances that being told Lucy Letby tried to kill their baby is the most concrete and salient bit of information these parents have been given at all? And no matter how horrible it is, what are the psychological benefits of having a person to blame, a culprit?
Dr. Breary told us that he felt that with his condition, our son would be better cared for if he was sent to Liverpool Women's Hospital.
Personally, I think if he'd have stayed at Chester, I think he'd have died.
That decision is what saved him, I think.
It's possible they're completely right there, and it's also possible that has nothing to do with Lucy Letby.
Yeah, and we'll always be grateful to that doctor for that, won't we? So away from Chester, we picked up really quickly and then we were sent back home again.
One set of parents described the difference between the Countess of Chester and Liverpool Women's Hospital as like night and day. The Countess of Chester, with its Pseudomonas and sewage leak and panicking medics Googling how to do what looked like relatively simple procedures. According to the mum of the triplets, they didn't appear to have a hand-washing protocol. And of course we now know they were mopping up sewage leaks with nappy pads above the ceiling tiles. And then these parents go to a hospital that is clean and organised and where the staff are polite. The gaslighting that these poor parents have been through is really, really difficult to hear about. And the state of that filthy, understaffed hospital is really shocking. And as anyone really familiar with the case will know, this is the account of many of the parents, but also many others too. And let's not forget about what the solicitor said. when the Countess of Chester had instructed them, because they were so concerned about medical negligence claims, of which there have been countless examples. And this solicitor warned them, do not confuse the correlation between the downgrading of the unit with Lucy Letby leaving, because you will have far fewer deaths, but that's because the acuity and overall number will have dropped significantly. But what did they do? They removed Lucy Letby and redeployed her to desk duties at exactly the same time as they downgraded, so the police and prosecution could later turn around and go, ta-da! We remove Lucy and look. I'm not trying to suggest that the staff at the Countess of Chester are somehow less caring or skilled, but this is what happens when you cut public services to the bone. Some of the hospitals are going to come out a whole lot worse than the others.
It was only when we saw her face in the newspaper later on that we both recognised her straight away.
And this is where it gets really difficult, because I bet they heard about the story before they saw her face. In fact, when the news broke that there was a police investigation regarding deaths and collapses at that hospital, I bet they were in bits. When you're anticipating something like this, the amount that can go on subconsciously is kind of mental. Now, we're all prone to it, even when we're on our guard. That could probably even make it worse. So, look, maybe they were contacted by the police, who were concerned that Lucy Letby may have harmed their baby, and there's something specific they think she did. But what's the accusation anyway? She laughed. It's all just so spurious. Now, I understand that this is also the husband's experience as well, but I think there's surely a danger that people corroborate and confirm each other. And you just need to look at information on police lineups, for example. Like, I know that I once identified somebody who, it wasn't him. It wasn't the right guy. This happens, surprisingly often. Our memories are not a static snapshot in time. They are adaptive and malleable and highly influenced by other things that sometimes we don't even understand.
There's always going to be two sides to it, isn't there?
Personally, I think she's 100% guilty. 100% guilty.
I veer from being guilty to not guilty, depending on how I feel that day, because I definitely feel something went on at the hospital. But then I also find it so hard to believe that somebody could actually do something like that.
Okay, so this is really sad. And again, I like this mum. I think she is circumspect and thoughtful. Of course, it's difficult to think that anyone would do that, and maybe especially so if you've met them. But I just can't imagine that if Lucy Letby really had laughed in a way that could reasonably be perceived as sadistic, and that it let them hanging on, waiting to see if their child had made it, and not in a consolatory, soothing or nervous way, then I wonder if they really would find it that difficult, because we know people do things like this. It's extraordinarily rare, but we know that people sometimes do things like this. And I hope I'm not falling into the trap of, well, if I was her, kind of idiocy that people often project upon victims of crime or tragedy. But if it had been this wildly inappropriate and plausibly sadistic act, I'd expect to hear that this picture induced a jolt back to that laugh. That there might be some description, particularly in a documentary, where they're obviously trying to get a bit of controversy and suspense built up, because that clip saying it was Lucy Letby who laughed at us made the trailer. You'd have thought that it would, the fact that there's no mention of. And as soon as I heard there was a nurse that had been charged, I just suddenly thought back to that laugh and why it made me feel so sick to my stomach, and why it's always really disturbed me. I couldn't put a name to it before, because we have quite a problem with this Lucy Letby case and the number of uncorroborated accusations that she made weird comments, or the claim of the anonymous female doctor who said she had made this macabre sort of ominous comment as to a baby not getting out of here alive. She had already turned against Lucy Letby at that stage, and she made no note, and it wasn't supported by her colleagues. Or it was, well, she was a blonde nurse. Other blonde white nurses worked there on the unit with the babies, and even Ravi Jairam appears to have been confused as to whether he was dealing with Letby or another nurse on one occasion. And additionally, nobody made reports of these things at the time. And I know it's difficult to, and we probably don't want to complain to the NHS, but is it not a bit weird that none of them did? That is a bit of a concern for me. You can see here that the mum and dad are in different states of mind, certainly sometimes. And I think it appears that the dad is quite set and certain on his view. And the mum then spoke afterwards, and she was a little bit more reticent, looking at him while he was just faced quite rigidly ahead. And you've got to wonder about the predicament of the parents who may be concerned about Lucy Letby not being guilty. I mean, they do tend to be infantilised and patronised with all these sort of pop-ups, self-appointed spokespersons, which is always uncomfortable. And it is also sort of stupid because there are a large number of people now, but I dread to think how painful and isolating and just disconcerting it must be to be one of the parents and have genuine doubts about her guilt. I think there's a high chance they'll feel like traitors. And for those who aren't at that stage yet, I think it's likely they're going to be struggling with quite a lot of cognitive dissonance at times. As for there was something going on at that hospital, well, damn right it was. It was dirty, cramped. There were 2 consultant ward rounds a week, and staff were demoralised and trying to cope with babies they weren't fit to. The mum goes on to show what was in the box, which was a little baby hat and a diary and, like a little teddy, or for you to hug and then put next to the baby so they can smell you. And then she sensibly explains that from her perspective, I think quite rightly, if you actually give it any thought whatsoever, the box should be given after they've seen the baby, because this little coffin-sized box is not like the most reassuring sight from the outset. Personally, what I can't get over is the idea that you could be completely in the dark about your child being resuscitated 3 times, or you're just waiting for some news. What if he died? They'd be denied even the chance to give him a cuddle as he died. While, possibly still responsive, still warm. I mean, God. They were just sitting in the delivery suite thinking what's going on, and their child was being resuscitated. They didn't have a chance to pray, make blessings. All while sat in the same hospital.
Obviously, there's no concrete evidence.
I wonder if there's even a suggested accusation.
We don't have a magic ball that we can go back and look at, but it's just too much.
The reason these people are suffering, aside from what will be described in a moment, is because a bunch of doctors and police decided that they could construct this case, dragging their lives into it forever. This is definitely a kind of mental torture, and it's really sad. Listen to this bit.
He was fine when he was smaller, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It wasn't until he was about 5 years old when we started having serious issues with him. He is delayed at school by about 2 years from where he should be. He still can't write very well, and he's had really bad seizures where they've not stopped for 15-20 minutes.
This is really, really hard, and knowing people as I do with disabled children, particularly I know one person with a young adult who's severely epileptic and autistic, and for many years begging for respite and help. She's not been given any, and when she got very, very ill with COVID, they tried to put her child in a care home on the other side of the country. I mean, this is a young woman who has never been looked after by anyone other than her mum, who is non-verbal in almost any social situation. I mean, what the fuck? We are really bad at not looking after people who need that care. I can only guess if I was unfortunate enough to be in this situation, I would be eaten up with the anxiety and fear and rage, with ruminating on what might have happened and what could happen because of it, of course. It sounds awful, and a child having a seizure for 15-20 minutes, I dread to think the damage they do to themselves. It's awful.
Occasionally he'll ask us if he has a fit, will he die? And that I find the most scary thing. All weekend he kept saying to me, I wish I was normal, I wish I was normal. And it's so sad because I keep trying to say to him, well, you are normal for you. Like, we love you how you are. He just wants to be like everyone else.
Well, that is absolutely gut-wrenching. All children want to be able to fit in and muck around with their peers, and to have seizures is absolutely terrifying. Everyone's going to be frightened. People won't be able to look after him unless they've had advice and guidance. He won't be able to play sports along with his friends without loads of monitoring. And then, of course, they don't know if this is progressive. But more so than any of that, here's this mother who's trying desperately hard to reassure her child, like, you're fucking perfect as far as we're concerned, and we are forever grateful that you made it when we were terrified that you wouldn't. But as much as it's really important to remind him that he is profoundly loved and adored by his parents, his family, it does risk invalidating what he's saying about his feelings and his perspective. He's at an age where conformity is at its most precious and is almost a social imperative anyway. And I think there's a real danger in talking to him like, this is normal for you. See, he knows that. He doesn't want to be normal for him, though. And so, I mean, if she had been given the sort of support that we were led to believe these families were being provided with, counselling and access to specialist services, I don't think she'd be saying this. And while it's, of course, possible that the editing process has distilled what she said down to this, I think it still sounds like that she's run out of road, which is completely to be expected if she's not being given professional support in how to talk to him. I mean, none of this is easy or obvious. It's extremely complicated. All of us want to reassure our kids, any child we see who's struggling with something, no, you're grand, all of us want to do that. And it's very difficult, full stop, especially when they have so many questions hanging over their heads. But I think, it would be much better if it was along the lines of, you're completely right. This is brutally unfair. You did absolutely nothing to be selected or picked out, and we are going to make this better for you. Are the school making sure that you can interact and engage with the other kids as much as possible? Would meeting other children with disabilities help you feel less alone in all of this? And we could go on about, the likelihood he grows out of it, or there are managements and treatments, medications that will help aid this. But this hurts. This hurts. I get you. That's not really that obvious. I think we all tend to go for the, no, it's fine, no, you've got this wrong. Why isn't she being supported with this? You can see that she's trying her utmost. And I don't believe for one second that if she'd had access to the myriad tools there are for speaking to children with disabilities, she wouldn't be using them. My guess is their son knows full well how deeply loved he is. And I would bet money on them being forever changed and more grateful by this horrendous experience. So grateful they have a living child. I bet they tell him how much they love him all of the time. But this isn't about that. It's about what he's suffering, whether it's painful, the shame that may be associated, whether he feels ostracized, his self-esteem, how he fits in with other kids at school or when he's out in the park or whatever, how he feels as he fits in as an individual into society. And these are really important feelings that need to be acknowledged, and that pain and anger and feelings of being excluded need to be expressed somehow. For all the supposed benefits of having a culprit, it doesn't appear that they've been given any kind of real substantial answers or solutions in this whatsoever. They sound very alone, like I say, compounded likely by the anonymity. And that, I think, feeds into the next bit, the last bit of what they say that I'm going to include in this video, which I'm going to go into at some depth because I find it a bit concerning, really.
The day that she was given a sentence, obviously it was all over the news.
You seen it on the telly?
And he saw our reactions.
Yeah.
And obviously wanted to know why Mummy and Daddy were upset.
He was crying, wasn't he? And he was saying, is that who I think it is? So that's the nurse, isn't it?
That's the naughty nurse that tried to kill me.
Okay, so their son would have been 8 when Lucy Letby was convicted in 2023. And as his mum has described, he's about 2 years behind in school and still can't write very well, and he'll now be 10 and a half. So it's probably fair to describe him as intellectually disabled. So how appropriate is it he's aware of this? And I haven't heard many people talk about this, but I'm imagining that's because everyone is so terrified of appearing to diss the parents when obviously no one wants to do that. So anyway. Many years ago, Joanna Yates in Bristol was murdered. And this is in fact when Christopher Jeffries hit the headlines, in the worst way possible for him, because it was widely speculated in the papers that he was her killer. He was her landlord. He looked weird. Joanna had gone missing sometime before Christmas, like maybe a week before Christmas, and it was huge nationwide news. There was a big missing campaign, there were reconstructions, all that sort of thing. And Christmas Day that year, I am round my then boyfriend's parents' house with all of his family, and up on the news pops this beautiful picture of Joanna with her cat. It was a breaking news segment, and the headline was "Body Found." It was a really snowy, beautiful, idyllic looking Christmas, and tragically it had been used to conceal poor Joanna. My boyfriend's nephew, who I'm pretty sure was 8, was just gobsmacked. I saw just his jaw drop. He was ashy white, and he turned to me and said, "I think somebody killed her cat." And that has always stuck with me ever since. Just the sight of this poor little kid amidst the jollities of Christmas, just abruptly confronted with the fact that there is absolute evil in the world. So horrible. It was just inconceivable to him that somebody would have killed her. So surely it's just impossible for a child of that age to understand an attempted murder on themselves, and it's a terrifying prospect to consider. Anyway, that's what I thought. So I asked Grok to test out whether it was as bad as I thought. And I think it is, unfortunately. I think it's just as inappropriate and indigestible to a child's mind as I had previously thought. See, that informing them at this age raises significant ethical, developmental and psychological concerns. These were ordinary people who had a horrible, sometimes tragic time in hospital, who, with no choice in the matter, were swept up in this enormous, internationally known scandal. All of the unanswerable questions, the sensationalism and the appeal to people like, true crime fanatics. Obviously, the controversy, I mean, I guess that was unexpected. And the insane depravity of all of these claims, all of this launched onto ordinary families who have suffered all of their own traumas being exacerbated or magnified or created by this knock on the door unexpectedly a couple of years later. Sometimes on the morning she was arrested and it was national news. All of that, and they're trying to navigate being a parent in these circumstances and clearly not being given the help they're supposed to. It must have been impossible. I can't imagine. Typically, 7 or 8-year-old has only just started developing a more sophisticated ability to tell fantasy from reality. I mean, there's a large amount of variation, obviously, but this child has developmental delay. 8 is the average age, with a lot of variation either way, when children stop believing in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy or the Easter Bunny. I mean, try watching a sci-fi movie where there's a bunch of 7-year-olds in the audience and, see how they react to the special effects. Says here, disclosing the attempted murder could further stigmatise them, especially if peers learn about it, for example, through media leaks or family discussions. That again raises the issue of the anonymity and their freedom to be able to express what they have learned. Studies on children with disabilities show that additional trauma knowledge increases peer rejection risk by 25 to 30%. Christ above. So, I mean, who exactly is looking after these families, eh? Are they all Dowie Evans type mavericks who just make it up as they go along, as long as it sort of feeds their ego? Or were they just left on their own to muddle through? Because I bet they wouldn't have chosen this for their child. I mean, it's just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. This is just such niche fucking stuff to work your way through, especially when you're traumatized. But apparently it's me and my ilk who are so callous and harmful towards the families, rather than the people who gleefully lap this all up and rant on social media about how Lucy Letby loved to torture these poor little babies who are in agony, and it was all right under the noses of their mothers who were tricked. They just didn't see it. But, these people, they can see it. They cheer on Operation Hummingbird and all of the officers involved, Dewi Evans and the negligent Ravi Jayaram, and, want these people to believe that their babies were murdered or suffered an attempted murder. Yeah, they're the good guys. It's a funny world and I don't understand it. But anyway, this little cutie is Kaylee Asher, who suffered some brain damage at or around the time of her delivery. And as a 14-month-old baby in a Grantham hospital, she suffered an air embolism at the hands of Beverly Allett. And maybe this gives us a rare insight into how the child of the parents in the documentary may feel in years to come. It was only after the attack that Kaylee was adopted, which just makes it really especially upsetting, as if a 14-month-old baby with brain damage isn't about as vulnerable as they come. She didn't even have a mum or dad. While Kaylee was already disabled with a brain injury at birth, the attack by Allett exacerbated this massively, and she's in her mid-30s now and still lives as a dependent at home. She'll never live independently. And as it says here, on the day Lucy Letby was found guilty, Kaylee caught the news at a day centre and misunderstood the meaning of her refusal to appear in court. Sharon, her mum, said. She came charging home and said, "Mum, she's guilty, but she's not going to be in the courtroom on Monday. That means this weekend she can come and get me." Kaylee's been left with a truckload of traumatic symptoms since the disclosure, and interestingly enough, her parents never actually told her about the Allett attack because she was already terrified of medical procedures and medical professionals. Kaylee's mum tried to reason with her and says, "Well, Lucy Letby doesn't even know you. Why would she come to get you?" But for Kaylee, it's an obvious danger. And so every night before going to sleep, Kaylee has to check everywhere in her room for Beverly Allett. under her covers, under her pillows, behind her bed, inside wardrobes, under the drawers of her bed, everywhere. For poor Kaylee, her disability has further traumatised her because of collapsing and dying on an operating table in surgery a couple of years ago. Her parents have only just found out that she thought Beverly Allitt was in the operating theatre. Her fear has only become worse and more pronounced with time. They believe she was too young to remember, which obviously she was, but someone at school told her and she came home absolutely furious. And this is something I would bet money is the reason for why these parents have told their child and told him so young, is to avoid that feeling of betrayal. And I started to wonder, well, child rearing is culturally informed, and maybe there is a strong case for being open and honest from the outset, much like people are now with children who've been adopted. But again, it would appear the evidence points towards not doing this, or at least by the age of 7 or 8 having broached it in such a gentle way they have no idea that there was malevolent intent. Because here the narratives are really different. I mean, one, children who've been adopted may well have some either symptoms of or direct memories of having different parents, and certainly the trauma and loss. All adopted children, they always start from a position of profound loss, for having lost their birth family for whatever reason it is, and then the narrative around it is really different. With adoption, it can be very easily kind of turned to being about love. Your mum loved you, but she couldn't look after you, and we loved you, we wanted you, we really, really wanted you, and so we took you on, and gradually you could turn that around into kind of giving more information over, well, actually your mum was, I don't know, an addict, an alcoholic, way out of control. God forbid she'd been raped. She was really far too young, or whatever. But it's still with this strong, overbearing message of love, and we chose you, we wanted you. Whereas somebody who was entrusted with your care, made a serious attempt on your life, is difficult to spin and extremely difficult to graduate into the full story. I mean, this has had such a profound impact, not just on Kaylee, but Kaylee's sister has a child who frequently needs to be in hospital for tests, and she is terrified to leave her child alone with any medical professional, which must make life, well, difficult. And a key difference here is Kaylee's parents knew the situation and chose to become involved at that stage, and presumably had some support from social services as well, whereas the parents in this documentary just had a really horrendous time in hospital, and then realised at age 5 their child is disabled, and then at some point along the line had a knock on the door from the police, and have been dumped into this absolute quagmire of ethical issues and trauma and horror, and the danger that parental trauma can pose to vulnerable children is really serious. It's something we all need to consider if you have any PTSD or reactive issues concerning traumatic events. Raising children is not easy, and raising disabled children is especially not easy. And along the way, they have been dragged into this international scandal and seemingly not given anywhere near the number of tools they require to deal with it. Everywhere I've looked, I mean, this is just very depressing reading about children feeling even more ostracised, experiencing, sometimes developing full-scale PTSD after disclosure, and particularly the effect of traumatised parents trying to navigate this with their children. They should have been given wraparound, proper, tailored support immediately. It's absolutely shocking this hasn't happened, and obviously looking at the impact on Kaylee, I dread to think what the impact may be on this boy. And for these families, it's not something they're going to be able to walk away from. I can't imagine. It's an outrage, it's an absolute outrage that all the systems that we have not protected these families from worsening the situation inadvertently. Though I would say that I'm sure they can reel it back in with some professional support now. I'm sure they can do a lot of healing. But still, I mean, even just the fact that it was on the telly, he already knew, you know, the fact that he wasn't completely shielded from it, the fact his dad was crying. I mean, speak to a lot of adults, and that's quite a seismic moment for a lot of people when they see their dad cry for the first time. It's really, really upsetting. You know, they're clearly trying really hard and attentive and caring parents, and they're saying it as if it's the most natural thing in the world. I'm going to leave it there. I hope people can see that I have a lot of compassion for these people, because I really do. Bringing up kids is really hard, and I mean, there's loads of stuff that I wish I'd been kind of more keyed in about before I'd had my kids. We all make mistakes, you know, it's fraught with that, but God, this just, I think when you're in the eye of the storm, it is so difficult to keep a perspective. And while it may seem really shocking to some people, I would have thought it would. I just don't see anyone comment on it. It seemed genuinely very shocking to me that these parents were saying this. And actually, on closer examination, it's really understandable, because this just swallowed up their worlds. And I hope they have nothing but good things, and can, you know, heal any wounds inflicted by this absolute, like, this witch hunt which they have been inadvertently dragged into. But yeah, that will be me for now. Not very cheery. Anyway, thank you all if you've listened this far, and good night. I really hope that we can get Lucy Letby out of the unspeakable nightmare that she is living in. But I think that is closer with every day, and that the people who have inflicted this on Lucy Letby and on the parents are made to pay.